I can taste your words. I can taste your.
Welcome to the Easy Answer Podcast. I'm Brandy, plant-based chef.
And I'm Vonanise, plant-based adjacent.
On this podcast, we explore thought-provoking conversations around food
and simple ways to stay healthy in this crazy world.
So, Vaughn, you live in a neighborhood that is known for its history of gentrification. I think that narrative started back when I think Clinton got his office there and flipped the script on good old Harlem, what used to be the town of all things African American. What have we got? The Cotton Club, we got the Harlem Renaissance, and all of that good stuff. Ended up becoming the new it place, and now. Yeah. And now there's a shift, and the word that's associated with that shift, I think I said it at the beginning, I can't remember. I just talk. Gentrification, right? Gentrification. Is
the
this
dirty word?
The dirty word. I'm about to say, is it though? Is gentrification a dirty word?
I mean, I think that people always tie it into race, and it's not necessarily tied into race. It's more like a class thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And why would you say that?
Just because I think that, in America, we always think like Black people are here, white people are here. And that's not necessarily true. The true narrative is that there are poor Black people, there are middle class people, Black people, there are upper class, there are rich Black people. There are few that are rich, but there are Black people in every category of, class. Mm-hmm. And so I just think that, we always need to be aware of that, because we ourselves shouldn't spread the narrative that Black people are always poor. Mm-hmm. Because that's not true. It's a lie. Mm-hmm. I'm not poor. Right. I'm not rich, not yet, mm-hmm. But I'm not poor.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, Easy Answer Podcast, we talk about food. So what's interesting is to see certain food restaurants, certain options becoming available in neighborhoods that start to let us know gentrification might be happening, or this neighborhood might be on the come up. So if you see a Starbucks, probably on the come up. If you see a Chipotle, probably on the come up. The same's gonna happen with a Whole Foods, of course. You probably, if you haven't already come, you're definitely coming if they put a Whole Foods there. Trader Joe's, Aldi's is actually on that list as well. There's a certain income bracket that comes with that. And it's just interesting how, go back again, it comes down to if corporations think that you have money, or, people think that you can make money off of a community for some reason, that means that you have access to better options.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're always thinking about ways in which, didn't you say that, you worked with an organization, and there was just like a woodland, and Brandy was in the New York Times. Hello, people.
Well, actually, I mean, let's I like to be what do you call it? Factual.
Tell us about that experience.
I started the organization. I lived in I used to work in real estate. My real estate company was super big on integrity. So I was in the marketing department. They would not allow me to promote property until I verified. I had to go to every person's listing and make sure that there was a park next to this, there was a grocery store across the street, all those things before I could actually market. That was kind of one of their claims.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it was cool, and it got me out of the office a lot. So I was really, I'm so happy with that.
Yeah.
So I ended up one day finding out about this woodland that was on in the neighborhood. I'd been living in that neighborhood for 3 years and didn't even know that it was there. So when the real estate agent told me, we went back and forth. I'm like, dude, I live on this block. There's no park over here. He's totally pulls out the tax maps when the road. I was like, maybe in the original plans. I said, well, listen, I'm going to leave early today and go look at this park that you allege is still over here. And I literally get, eat crow, obviously, because when I get to the block, I'm like, oh my God, there's a park. Now, I'm like, dude, this isn't really, you can't market this as a park. There's tires and bricks and all kinds of like people that dumped things in it. So it was really like abandoned and not really well maintained. But I was able to see the beauty in it all. So I was just
The
like,
space
wow,
was still available.
it was 3.4 acres in the middle of the Bronx. Like
Wow, that's a lot.
a lot of space.
For New York City, that's a lot.
It's a huge, like 3.4 acres, this beautiful tree canopy overlooking the water. It was just a really cool space. And so I had to, just in my spirit, I was like, we got to do something about it. We can't just let this just kind of go. And so it was a project that initially I thought was going to be a garden, like a food source garden. It never got to that because, when you're growing food in soil, there's a certain quality of soil that you want to make sure that you have. And also, there's a certain pH, there's a certain quality, there's a certain there's nutrients in soil. That's why when people grow food, you will have farmers will reuse like the soil over and over again. And they always take seeds from like their crops to save for the next season because they know that those seeds are strong and they know that they can count on them to create new seeds for the next season, right? So I'm like, okay, we can't grow food in the soil just yet. But the park did have, or the woodland technically did have really cool, like healthy mulberry trees. And we got a little area to the point where we could actually grow some herbs, which was really nice. But a lot of the reason for wanting to kind of own this park for the community, and when I got feedback from the neighbors as far as what they thought they really wanted, it was like, we want a garden because there's not a lot of options as far as food to grab. That across the bridge where I lived, across the bridge was a Pathmark at the time. It's not even Pathmark anymore. And then I think there was something called Morton, some type of random grocery store. But yeah, there weren't many options. So this conversation, we talked about how you want to grow your own food, right? You want to people wanted to grow their own food because the options were limited in the neighborhood. And it was in one of the like lowest, as far as the neighborhoods, like income.
The money per capita, the incomes per capita were the lowest in the city. It
was one of the lowest in the Bronx. So like, and the food options that showed up. We had some place called Chicken Pizza. Was it Chicken Pizza, Donut, and Ice Cream? Like that was the name of the store. Like I don't even understand the store that sells chicken pizza, donuts, and ice cream. I don't even understand. It was literally that was a store off the train. I was like, who's eating there? There was a McDonald's. There was no Starbucks.
Whenever it's like a community board meeting, we're going to really help this community. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. The first thing they do is build a community garden. It's like, really? That's what y'all doing? A community garden? Like, and I'm not trying to play nobody, but I always feel like, is that always your Band-Aid on that bullet wound? A community garden and a community center.
Well, the center I'll take. The garden, the problem with gardens and parks, a lot of people don't know this. There's not enough money in the budget to maintain them through the city. So there's a budget to.
You have to have a group of volunteers.
Yes,
an old lady that loves the garden and that wants to maintain the garden. That's a lot. What if she, her arthritis flares up and she can't get it going, for a season?
Agreed. I don't like that. It's a really twisted system. It makes absolutely no sense. But anyway, our conversation.
There's always someone to maintain Central Park. There's a group of
that's a reason for that, right?
Why? Please tell me.
Yeah, so Central Park there. So 80% of the funding that goes into Central Park comes from something called the Central Park Conservancy. Only 20% of the park's budget is allocated to Central Park, right? So 80% of it comes from the people around the park who donate into a fund, which is called the Central Park Conservancy, and they maintain it. So that's the challenge when you're talking about maintaining parks in neighborhoods that don't have money. We said for Bryant Park, right? Bryant Park has the Bryant Park Alliance, which is supported by all those businesses that surround Bryant Park.
Okay.
Hence, Bryant Park is able, but neighborhood parks, number one, as New Yorkers or taxpayers, we shouldn't have to do that, right? But in addition to it, most neighborhoods, there's no capacity to put into a fund when we barely paying rent. Just to keep
But we pay the parks department to maintain those parks. I live across the street from Jamel Mansion, and the parks department maintains Jamel Mansion because it's an historic, mansion that's attached to a park.
Yeah, but there's only so many resources that go into the maintenance of New York City parks. So that's a thing that most people don't realize. And most of the funding, crazy enough, goes to capital projects versus maintenance. Not a lot of money is left over for maintenance, and that's why most parks, the ones that are well maintained, and I'm sure the Jamel Mansion. I'm sure Jamel Mansion probably has some type of friends group or some type of group that's separate from the parks department to keep it maintained. That's literally, if you see a community park that's in order, that's usually what's happening.
Well, the houses around it maintain it, and then they also have a little area where they have herbs and stuff that they,
definitely managed by the parks department.
And they also, like, when I wanted to have an event there, I had to register with the parks department and get a permit. And then they, like, if they came by, like, that you needed to have certain rules, like you can't have alcohol, you can't have, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you have to register with the parks department.
Correct. Well, yeah, it's still a park. That's what's crazy about it. That's why it's so
tied into a nonprofit because they maintain it.
Yeah. So not it's not a
national. It's like a national monument type.
Yeah. There's a nonprofit, right? There's a nonprofit who's committed to sustaining the space in partnership with the parks department. But if that organization, if there wasn't somebody in the neighborhood or somebody that was passionate about that space to come in and start that initiative, that space would just literally be just left to the wayside. And that's the unfortunate thing about spaces and I only know about how New York is run, but I'm assuming maybe other cities are the same way. But if your neighborhood has more money and the people in your neighborhood have more time and resources to, I think it's a luxury to go and be like, oh, I'm going to volunteer every week for like the community park or for like the community mansion. If I'm barely paying my rent, those free hours are either going to be spent with me picking up some overtime if I can, or sleeping because I'm working so much, right? Because I'm tired. So it's not something, it's unfortunate because I don't feel like people should have to put so much time into managing a space, but that's what we are. Like, if you don't have money, or if you live in a neighborhood that has a low, per capita income,
below the income line per capita, yeah,
there's going to be some limitations. So, I mean, I want us to transition into our interview with Ella Butler, who's coming back again, talking about, like gentrification and how real estate developers how we can explore ways to partner with neighborhoods, because gentrification may be a dirty word, but there are some benefits to the
residents, and the people who live there. Yeah. There are benefits, and the first thing they're going to do is community center and a community garden, because that's what they love. Okay. Hello. Today we are back for part 2 of our conversation with the brilliant real estate broker, Ella DeSosa.
Welcome back, Ella.
Thank you for having me back. I didn't offend you guys or embarrass you the last time, so I'm back. I like it.
You're just like us, all right? You told us you were just like us, trying to figure it out. And so today our topic, this part 2 of our topic that deals with real estate, is the idea of gentrification.
The dirty word.
I mean, it's a dirty, dirty word. But Brandy
has a lot to say.
I mean, geez, Brandy, get it started.
Without the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh my goodness. So guys, listen, gentrification, I actually have a really in the middle take on gentrification. Like, I understand how gentrification can be good if it is properly managed. So I know a lot of my anti-gentrification people will probably come, because some people just hear gentrification and it becomes a whole thing. And I get it. That's great. But like, can we really say that gentrified neighborhoods aren't better off because of the resources that come when other people come in? I don't think we can say that, right? But at the same time, I think it's irresponsible as a developer to come into a neighborhood, make a plan for the neighborhood because you see potential in that particular neighborhood without considering the people that already live there. And I think that's the challenge that gentrification has, is that a lot of times it is done, or this act of coming in to improve some neighborhood because it has so many resources, and the people that live there now allegedly don't care about the neighborhood. They haven't, they have no interest. They're not motivated. They're tearing everything up. But these are the narratives that people tell themselves to justify why it's okay to come into somebody's home, regardless of the fact of how they're keeping it, and tell them that you have a better plan for them. So that's just how I want to open up the gentrification conversation. Ella, as a person who works with developers in this whole real estate space, how does this gentrification experience kind of show up?
For me, in my personal experience, I've worked with developers who were, putting in brand shiny new condos in neighborhoods that were gentrifying. And I've been at some of these community meetings where, the residents were not happy, as you said, with the way things were managed and the way they were overlooked. So, I mean, that's really the only personal experience I've had with it. Other than, a neighborhood's gentrifying and some of the homeowners that have been there, especially in Harlem. I've had this in the last couple of years. People that have been there for 60, 70 years were raised in these brownstones, and the neighborhood is going up in value because of this gentrification, and they're selling, cashing out, and moving down south. So for them, it's worked out well, right? Because their parents were maybe civil servants, 60, 70 years ago, a job that, it's one of the few jobs maybe that Black Americans, African Americans could get that paid okay, and they could afford these homes. So they seem to have done well. And that's my personal experience. Mm-hmm. So.
Vaughn, what are your thoughts on gentrification?
I'm from Harlem. I grew up in Spanish Harlem growing up, where they now have the new Costco. And when I lived there, that area at the end of the block, it was Washburn, actually. And there were a lot of Italian people in our neighborhood, and they used to find heads down there, legit, because the mob was in that area. It was an Italian, Hispanic, and Black neighborhood. Now there's condos and co-ops. I just saw an apartment there, a three bedroom, 2 bath. They're giving you 1 month off, and they wanted $2,700 a month. But they're giving you a month off, so they're saying it works out to $2,400. But I don't understand how that works out like that. Most people don't calculate it like that. They don't say, let me save this for the next month. They just, great, I don't have to pay rent this month. You know what I mean? Let me focus on another bill. So, but in that neighborhood, it's very unique because I grew up 2 blocks away from the project. So I grew up in a tenement. And I know people who still live in those projects. And because I grew up so close to those projects, they feel like my hood. All right. I don't have a problem walking through those projects when I need to go to Costco because it's Wagner projects. I grew up so close to it. And that neighborhood actually is going through is practically under martial law now, because the residents in the projects are fighting to keep but not the people with the great intentions, people with the unpure intentions are fighting to keep their hold on the projects, the gangs and the people who live in the co-ops. And so the police are coming in, they have a curfew and everything. And a lot of people don't know this about that neighborhood in New York. All right. Unless you live there, but I know people who live there. And I just feel I'm not saying that. I think the gentrification, because I'm from Harlem, when I graduated from Howard University, there were 2 girls I graduated with. One girl was from Atlanta. The other girl was from California. And I could only afford to pay, let's say I'm dating myself, $700 a month for rent. So I moved back to the building that my family lived in and paid $700. They moved into the second floor of a brownstone, which was now $1,500 a month. and their parents paid half of their rent while they paid the other half. So people think gentrification is about black and white, and a lot of times it's classism more so than it's racism. You know, those girls that I went to school with, they were black people. You know, we all went to Howard together. It's just that their parents had more resources available to them so they could afford to subsidize their children's rent in the way their minds couldn't be subsidized. And I think that a lot of times people are saying gentrification like the white people move in and the white people are doing stuff to us. But a lot of times it's people that look just like you that are moving into your neighborhood, but they have more, they're available, you know, they have more resources than you do.
But wouldn't you just say they're supporting the act of gentrification, like at the end of the day?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that those girls were perfect examples, right? Because their parents subsidized their rent in the way that I could not get my rent subsidized, you know? Mm-hmm. Their parents were able to make sure that they could live in the second floor of a brownstone where I couldn't live. You know, it was a central Harlem. One lived on 118th Street between Lenox and 7th, and the other one lived on 126th Street and 5th Avenue. So, you know, I think that sometimes, and I am like you, since I grew up in Harlem, I can see the benefits of gentrification because there were parts of Harlem there were blocks that were a little creepy, you know? I like that I could walk to a Starbucks now. I like that I don't have to get on a train and walk to the Starbucks. And, you know, I mean, I do like that there's Whole Foods in Harlem. Don't strike me down, Harlem guards. But I do like it. I don't always want to, like, have to go over the bus and through the woods to get to something. Like, if I have to go below 125th Street, that means I got to put makeup on. I got to look cute. I don't want to do that, you know?
I mean, look, the positives to gentrification are, you know, obvious, you know, commercial and residential development, which is going to lead to an increase in property values, and it's going to benefit the existing homeowners. Because like I was saying earlier, I have sold brownstones for a number of homeowners in Harlem that are true Harlemites. They have been there for, you know, 60, 70, 80 years. These are like, you know, 70-year-olds who were raised in the home that their parents left them, and have done quite well because of gentrification. And then, you know, there's also just improved economic opportunity, which you hope those economic opportunities are being offered to the people that live there. So, you know, you hope that those jobs at, you know, Whole Foods and management or, you know, whatever are being offered to the people that live there. I would like to know the statistics on that, actually.
Mm-hmm. That is really interesting. And I was just looking up the definition of gentrification because you guys know I love a reference. And like to Vaughn and Nisa's point, like the technical definition does kind of deal with class, because it says gentrification, the process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process. So it does come down to class, but then like to Ella's point, there's an opportunity to still support the people that already live there by giving them access to the jobs that these new businesses bring into these communities. And some of the better like development programs do things like that, where they give first like priority to the people to kind of hire them to work at the store. And then you also see, I know in New York, which when I heard about this, I thought it was absolutely nuts. I thought the program was cool. That whole 80-20 program, where it's like they build up a building, a luxury building, and 80% of the units are for like full pay, and then 20% are like lottery for people who are, you know, low income, so to say, and they get subsidies for these things. But what I thought was absolutely absurd is that they have a separate door for that 20% to go into. Yes. And that's unacceptable to me. Like, so you can come here, but you got to go around the back. Like, that's everything about that. It's like, and so it's like these attempts to appear as if we are, you know, being, but we're not. But then you do something like, you know, the poor door. I think that's what they got branded as. Like, which
yeah. Unacceptable. No, I mean, on 96th Street, I don't know if you guys heard about this, but around where the other Whole Foods is at, there were these like Michelama style buildings, right? And you have to be on a list. It takes like 10 years to get on the list. So, and there's a lot of the people who live there 10, 15 years. Then they built, then they started to ask for market rate and fix up the apartments. And they had amenities like gym. Don't you know only the people who were paying market rate could go to the gym? They wouldn't even let the residents and it was like this big story on the news. And I was like, why are they creating the class system in their own building? Like, why don't they just say to them, you could just pay to join the gym?
Join the gym.
And I feel like it's just anything to make people feel like they're less than. And I don't have that kind of time, and I just feel like, why are we treating people like that, And I feel like, one, it's you're trying to make people feel like they're less than, but two, it's sort of like when you say that you're going to bring jobs into this neighborhood and your jobs are Whole Foods, but the rent is $2,000 for a studio, that's not a real conversation about bringing jobs into this neighborhood, because Whole Foods is not going to pay me enough money as a stock person to be able to afford $2,000 a month rent.
But Whole Foods may be paying you more than the bodega or like the sneaker store, down the street. So like, remember, like these people, there's still a business involved. And our last episode, like Ella talked about, like in America, it's all about the business, right? And for as much as we want to, I think that you can find a place where humanity and business meet. I think that a lot of times businesses come to the table and their goal is just the bottom line. So it's not necessarily their responsibility to pay them a rate that supports the neighborhood, like living in the neighborhood.
But stop saying that, we're going to support the residents in this neighborhood. You need to give them an actual skill. Anybody wants the skill, so that they could afford to stay where they grew up.
Those are skills in the sense that, number one, if it's better than the opportunities that were there before, these are stepping stones, right? So everything is a stepping stone out. So a better opportunity than you had before. So one step up. And then some of these companies offer pretty decent healthcare and other advantages, right? That people can take care of. Like, I have a friend who, for instance, works at Starbucks, and she's like an upper middle class person. And I know that she got pretty amazing healthcare that allowed her to like have her baby, take time off, and allowed her to, sort of pay her way through graduate school. So it's not like the answer, but it is a stepping stone. But the question is I'd like to actually know, are these jobs really being offered to people in the neighborhood first, right? Like, there should be some sort of incentive, just like developers were given tax abatements to build these projects, and, they maybe should be given some sort of concession to make sure this percentage of the workforce at this place are people from the neighborhood.
And that's supposed to be like, that's how it's structured, a league, like how it's supposed to happen. But it doesn't always happen like that. Like, I've been to enough community board meetings with people, not happy about how these things all went down. And then a lot of times them having to fix, what they did, kind of like the Yankee Stadium project, where like there's actually a law in New York, if you build a property and it takes over like parkland, this particular development has to be able to build the exact same amount of parkland or more in order for it to like be approved. And they ended up getting rid of some significant parkland, and so they ended up like having to like fight through it. But then they do some like skate parks in, which don't necessarily require that same amount of like green space, but it's still a park kind of thing. But if they weren't checked, they would have just continued to just develop, get rid of the park, and it wouldn't even have made a difference.
That's true.
So, yeah. So I guess it is a combined effort. I guess when we talk about these conversations, like with these situations, it's not really we have to keep people accountable and out of the way of themselves, right? So if given the opportunity to go rogue, people are going to do, like, by nature, we're self-serving. We can't help it. It's just the survival of the fittest. This is how we're built. We can't help it. So it's really the community, the collective of the developers, the people with the jobs, the people that live there, to keep these checks and balances in place if gentrification is ever going to make sense.
A dirty word.
Yeah. Yes. is going to be clean.
I like to walk to a Starbucks, so I'm halfway in between, like happy for it, and then I'm just like,
I don't get the hype of like
though.
coffee. Like it's just weird to me. I don't get the Starbucks hype. All of their specialty drinks are overly sweet. Don't get it. They take a chai tea.
Brandy attacks all advertising.
It's not even a fact. Actually, there's something that I like. But like my thing is I'm a big integrity person. So if you're gonna be out here talking about you're selling coffee, but it's like subpar coffee, like coffee drinkers don't like Starbucks. You talk to people who drink coffee, Starbucks is it's subpar coffee, right? Yeah, they got some programs where they got coffee from Africa. Well, that's great, whatever. But then you talk about like a chai tea, like a frappuccino. It's just sugar with a shot of espresso at the end of the day.
That is true. That is true.
Okay.
But I love my sugar coffee.
Me too, Ella. Thank you very much.
You got y'all know the sugar, fat, salt. We can do a whole episode on that. That's the whole food industry, keeping us in the loop of unhealthiness.
And we need to take what is it again? Watermelon seeds and just eat them.
Yes, get your micronutrients from your watermelon seeds. They did that on purpose. Most of the watermelons don't even have seeds anymore.
See, they deal with health people. Like, really?
Oh my god! I can see Brandy like in the supermarket slicing open watermelons, checking for seeds. Oh my gosh!
Say, Brandy. So I think that we've conquered. Well, I think gentrification is such a nuanced issue that you can never conquer that issue. Yeah, and that it's about everyone evolving. The people in the neighborhood evolving. Because I met people. I know this lady who said she lives on 60-something Street and she's lived there so long she can't afford to move because moving is such an expense. So she's like, so people sometimes gentrification, it boxes you in a corner where you can't afford to move because how are you going to ever leave? And then your apartment's old, that doesn't get upgraded because they want to get you out so that they can get top market for it. So, it's a sad situation sometimes.
I mean, it all comes back to the system. I don't know how political we want to get in this episode. Comes back.
Well, they said they're trying to stop you from having watermelon seeds. Okay.
I don't know which system, how many systems we want to go after on this episode. The food system or the larger system. Because I think that's like as I reflect back on the definition of gentrification. I think the reason that it's kind of been defined as like the black against white thing is because it disproportionately affects people. You know what I mean? So that's really what it comes down to. And a lot of times at the hands of a white person. So that becomes the challenge. And so then it becomes a black and white thing. And so then it gets, like you say, the wealth and unwealthy thing, so to say, but that becomes clouded because no one can see that. It's just like, here's this white person coming after these black people again.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's America.
And Starbucks.
America's business. It's a business.
It is.
Remind people. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, as a real estate person, you would think Ella would defend it more, but she's like, nah, not really doing it.
I mean, what, defend the evils of gentrification or gentrification? Like, which side am I on? I mean, I've seen both sides, and I'm a listing agent mostly. I work mostly with sellers. So I would say my business is like 70% sellers, 30% buyers. So, in areas that are, like we say, gentrifying that I've worked in, like in Brooklyn or Harlem, I'm working with people who, like I said, have lived in these properties for 60, 70 years, black and brown faces that are making out well. So I'm seeing it from their vantage point, and where you're going to really see the hurt is really renters in those neighborhoods, because what happens is when the neighborhoods appreciate in value, then obviously that takes up the rent, the rental prices, and that's where the real hurt comes in. And so I actually don't work with that many renters on that side.
Ownership is key.
Yep.
I mean, but I also think we have to also say that ownership is still a privilege. Like we tote ownership around. Like, don't get me wrong. I think we should like be aspiring to own, but ownership is not something that you just do, because there's a lot of responsibility that comes with owning something. And if people aren't prepared for to own something, it can be more traumatic than never owning something before. So I think that we throw around this conversation about ownership without necessarily preparing people to be successful with that responsibility.
I mean, honestly, the first step is financial literacy, right? So it's about teaching people from when they're really young. I mean, I got my son, his bank account, he's got his Metro card. We have a little petty cash thing in the house where he has to when he's taking money, he has to do the deductions and the additions. Then, his dad is teaching him about the stock market. And there's some new system. I think Vaughn and Isu told me about it, where it's like an account kids can set up to like buy and trade. But, it has certain parameters, obviously, for kids. So we're doing that stuff with him, starting him really young, teaching them. And I have a girlfriend, actually, who she's an estate planner, but she goes into low income, working class neighborhoods and, has seminars on financial literacy. So that's where it starts. Because you're right. It's not just about owning, it's about how do I get myself into a position where I'm able to own in a way that is beneficial to me and is not going to put me underwater, right?
Yeah.
And
we don't have another 2008 situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. And it's fresh in our minds.
Yeah, that'll be fresh for like 100 years from now.
Real.
People are still talking about that. Every time, all you have to do is mention 2008, and people are like, "Oh, right." It's like, it doesn't matter who it was. From I'll mention it to my stockbroker clients, to the dorm. Everybody was just affected. Everybody.
And it took years.
But to be fair, the people on the what did they say? People in lower income neighborhoods, if America gets a cold, they get pneumonia.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right, guys. So I think that wraps our conversation about gentrification. Thanks again for joining us for the Easy Answer podcast. Until next week, remember to be super easy. Thanks, Ella.
Bye. Bye.